what I've always tried to do is to develop my own style, and what the goal is to be effective. And coming from a team sport, I learned that everybody can't talk at the same time, and you have to listen and learn how to take away from whatever is being said, and then have your comments be made when it's appropriate. So, look, there's a lot of different projects that I've been involved in. Magic Project was one that I started that company with him. I'm from Seattle, as Everett said, but I moved down here in '85, and with an idea in mind that I felt like this would be a better environment for me to further develop my business skills. So for me, I've just always tried to be as much a student of the game as I can, even at this later stage in my career. And I never stop learning or feel like there's not something that I can't continue to learn. And I like to listen, because at times you'll hear, you'll learn things from some pretty smart people. So, look, enough talk about me, Everett. Let's just open it up, kind of start going down the road of the Q&A. I'll be as transparent as I can. And the hope is that the subject matter that we're going to talk about, you guys have some things that you can walk away with. My approach has always been, I'm not really that into the celebrity piece. And so I appreciated his talent as a basketball player and who he was. But I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm not exaggerating on this, I had the deal that he wanted to do, and that I had the expertise in the movie theater business. I had the opportunity and the relationship with Sony, and we came together because he liked the opportunity that it presented, and decided that it would be okay for us to be partners. But from day one, it was a conversation amongst equals. And I can't shoot a jumper like him, I can't pass like him, and I ain't got handles like he did. But at the end of the day, on the business side, I knew what I was doing. And that's just because over the years, I became a sponge. I wasn't always trying to impress people with what I knew, as much as try to sit and soak up as much as they could teach me. And so by the time I got to that opportunity presented itself, it wasn't one that I felt at all intimidated with, because frankly, if I had gone into that meeting and he had said to me, you know what, I don't think this is for me, then I would have taken my deal somewhere else. Now, would it have been the same? Would it have been as effective? I mean, for me, partnering up with Magic was a tremendous platform for me. And it allowed me to become successful on the business side, but as much as anything, take advantage of relationships and opportunities that came my way, like Howard Schultz, who founded Starbucks, that asked me to come in and try to help him build a music business. So things like that occurred as a result of it, but it wasn't an end all be all for me, because I knew I had the deal. And that's the one thing I've always felt. If I have the opportunity and I control it enough, then I can control who gets to come in and who doesn't.
Okay.
So I honed what would be my marketing and my sales skills, but that wasn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And so when I moved down here, I had moved down with a real estate firm, and found that while I love real estate, there was another opportunity that had presented itself with a local nonprofit out here called ERC. And they were located in Linwood. They're in that industrial park back there. But one of the things that they did is they invested in minority businesses. And most of the folks here are too young to remember the old Baldwin Theater. But
Right.
I always had a kind of a fascination on investing in minority businesses, because I grew up in a family of small businesses. So we used to be in the dry cleaning business when I grew up. So
Okay.
the first real opportunity that came to me was the old Baldwin Theater, because it was in their portfolio. It was having problems, and I had an idea that I felt like I could take this and build it, but I needed to partner with one of the major firms. And at the time, I partnered with AMC Theater. So that was really the first deal that I felt like got me on track. That didn't go. We put it together, but it didn't go far. And I ended up. That's when I jumped and pulled the deal and the partner. And when Magic and I came together to form Magic Johnson Theaters. And there's a fact that a little known fact, some of us know it, and Bobby, I'm sure you do, that you can't listen and talk at the same time.
Yes.
And so, I like to feel like, there are people there are times folks come in and they kind of suck all the oxygen out of the air, and that you can't, you find yourself actually getting turned off at times because they won't let anybody else talk. And so finding the right balance, I do believe we need to, you can't just sit there quietly all the time, but you got to find the right balance. Because if you don't find the balance, then, folks are the reaction has a tendency to be way too negative. So as you all are developing your skills, you'll know when it's time to talk. I always feel like in my head, if I feel like whatever I'm saying is going to add some value, I don't ever feel like I need to make a comment just because I haven't said anything through the course of the conversation. If I haven't had anything to add that I feel adds value, I can keep stepping.
Agreed.
All right, Ken, Marvin Bishop here.
Hey, Mark.
I'm the in-house performance coach with Boss, and a wise man once told me that if you want to take someone somewhere, you got to go down their alley first and bring them back to where you are. And it's very obvious early on that you traveled a road less traveled. So what I'm trying to think now is this: that these kids that's listening to us now, I'm not even sure if they even know what Magic Johnson Theater is, or even Magic Johnson for the most part, because they're so young. But a lot of them probably do. But this is my question to you: how you just talked about value, right? And we know in this country they don't pay you for the hour; they pay you for what you put in the hour. And so there's obvious some value you brought to the table to even get someone like Magic Johnson, or even talking about working for would you say you work for Xerox or IBM, one of those two?
I was IBM.
IBM. So I know from being from your era, maybe even a little older, that man, you had to be a bad boy to get a job with them, or someone with your skin complexion, right, in that era. So my question is this: how did you even get? Tell us, can you share with these young guys, how did you get from where you were born to even get in a position, even go to IBM or work with Magic? Can you give us some capsules? How did you get there? What principles did you use? What was your philosophy? Because obviously you was about some success and peak performance from the very beginning. So you can you take us back and let us, or unless you just was born this way?
No. I was fortunate. The first thing I kind of figured out is I didn't never walk into a room thinking I'm the smartest person in the room, but I know I could probably work as hard, and I've learned to work as smart as anybody. But let's go back for a bit. So I was a junior in college. I was playing for the University of Washington. My career was okay. I had some, Washington and Seattle. That school's unlike here, where you got USC, you got a lot of University of Washington, and Seattle's pretty much it, right? And so, people know you. But what I figured out early on is I was clear in my head I wasn't going to try to go to Europe. and I definitely wasn't going to play in the NBA. So I started like my sophomore year trying to figure out where I could get a job that could give me some training. So when I came out, I had a job after college. And so I was walking around campus, and this brother told me that IBM was hiring these interns. And this was my junior year in college. And so I went and I applied for the job. I mean, I chased this job down. And it ended up when I went for my interview, I'll never forget the day I had on, and I know Everett, Bobby, and the older group here laugh. I had on my platform shoes. I'm already 6'6". I had a big natural. I had on the only jacket I had, which was some kind of plaid looking jacket with some bell bottom pants. And I walked in, and the brother who was in charge said, "Man, you're already 6'6". You don't need them additional 2 or 3 inches on them platforms." So, but we sat and we talked. And so my point to you is I was rough, I was rough around the edges. If you couldn't see that I had potential, that, it wasn't coming right out, but we had a good conversation. So he said to me, I like you. I'm gonna give you this opportunity, but you got to take this test. And I'm like, test? I ain't ready for no test. It's like, what kind of test you talking about? So he gives me this test. I had the job after the interview. I went and took this test and he went back, he came back to me and said, "Brother," he said, "Man, I really want to give you this job, but you didn't quite do as well on the test as I would have hoped. So I'm gonna have to do some." So this was in January, and I called him every week. In between classes, I'd run into the building. There wasn't no cell phones back then, right? It was pay phones. I put in a call. I called him every week for 4 months until finally he said, "You know what? Your persistence is what has made me realize I need to give you this opportunity," and I got the job. And that was my internship in my junior year. And what I did is I worked hard, and I got along with everybody, and I wasn't running around like I'm the smartest guy in the room, because I wasn't. And it ended up where, it was like, this thing was slipping away, and I couldn't let it happen. I mean, I swear I didn't talk to him every time I called him, but I left him a message. And he knew. He said, "Man, I got to hire this kid because he ain't going nowhere." Because I was going to park myself in front of that building if I had to get that job. And that was really the first break for me. That's how I started my career with IBM.
So Ken, stay with me now. Stay with me, because we're going to go back a little further. So at the end of the day, it wasn't that test, but you're talking boss stuff. You're talking
His
about
principle.
consistencies in these principles. That's the point that I'm trying, because remember this, Ken, most of the people on this call, they even got to college, they pre-college. So I want to go all the way back because, see, obviously you brought that to the table, that persistency. So let's go back to at least 7, 8, 9, and then walk us up. Where did you get that from? What made you, because watch this, they did research, and the research question was this: how many times do an individual attempt to achieve their goal before they quit? And the answer was, some people say 3, 10, 11, but the answer was less than 1. Now, again, I flunked the kindergarten twice, but I know ain't no number less than 1. See, so that means some people quit before they even start. But here you come to a table with a Fortune 500 company, and what ultimately got you in the game and gave you the foundation for all this great stuff you've done was this persistency. So can you take us back to when you was a kid? Because that's what I want these young guys to understand, the principle. That piece about persistency, not giving up. Obviously, you had some vision. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, look.
Can we talk about that? Go back to your childhood and then bring us up.
Yeah.
Look, my childhood is, I grew up with very traditional parents, and a dad that essentially you kind of did. If he told you to do something, you didn't get to ask why, because the answer was going to be because I told you to do it. And we all had to work in this cleaners, and literally, like, if anybody, nobody probably been behind the scenes of cleaners, but it ain't no glamour work.
Whose
And
cleaners was it?
it was my grandfather's,
Okay.
and eventually I got it. And but the business itself was hard work. You didn't get to sit around. In the beginning, my job was mopping floors and cleaning toilets. And I remember one time, that I was in the back. My grandfather was also cheap, so it wasn't like you had nice, shiny, new anything, right? The, the hangers he got from the tuxedo guy, he had a relationship, and all he did was throw them in the box, and you had to untangle them without. I mean, it's all kind of crazy stuff. But the one story I always remember is I was determined this one day. I said, I ain't cleaning this nasty toilet. You know, and I told him, I said, you gotta, like, somebody need to buy a new toilet around here. So, and my mother came back and she said, what's wrong with you? I said, I'm tired. I'm not doing this. And she said, well, you got that brush. I said, this brush ain't big enough. This ain't the right thing. So all of a sudden, my mother walked away. She came back. She had a toothbrush in her hand. She said, now clean that toilet, boy. And took my brush and gave me a toothbrush. So my point being is, I always came up, there was a lot of discipline in my house, and there was a lot of hard work, and you didn't get to ask. I didn't ask if I could go work at the cleaners. We were told we were working at the cleaners. You got 50 cents a day. And, when I went for a raise, asked for a raise when I was like 12, my grandfather took it to $1. And I'm like, that wasn't no minimum wage even back then. So you learn to work hard, and you learn to understand that, look, at that time, I didn't get the fact that this was going to eventually help to shape me, but it did. It just, from a value perspective, I appreciated all the work that they were doing. It provided us with a nice lifestyle. And I say that we weren't rich, but we were able to go to the schools we wanted to. But even then, I didn't appreciate a lot of it. I didn't like going to the private school. It was all boys school. I had me a girlfriend at the time, and then wanted to go to the public school. And my dad was like, nah, that ain't gonna happen. So there are a lot of things that, when I look at how the road that I've been on, it hasn't been easy. And, you just keep pushing. And to the question about how many times, you get knocked down, look, I always think there's another opportunity around the corner. And you begin to realize in time that everything always works out. As long as you ain't doing anything that's illegal, you stand on a road that makes sense, you can be as creative as you want to be as an entrepreneur, and you keep your integrity. To me, is probably the most important value, or at least let's just say talent that I have. My integrity is first and foremost to me. Doesn't mean that I have to agree with everybody. Doesn't mean that I have to do everything that they want me to do, but I'm gonna do it so I feel comfortable that the integrity that I have that's important to me is never compromised.
Why is that?
Because at the end of the day, I gotta feel good about what I'm doing. And making money, you learn that at a certain point you know how to make money. It's tougher to keep it. You got to learn the discipline to understand what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And at a certain point, you got to balance what you want to buy and everything else. Look, you got these rappers and everybody else that's making this money hand over fist. I'm fortunate in that I have been able to be successful and build my career and the wealth that I have. But it ain't something that, like, my son and daughter, they'll tell you in a minute, they come ask me for money, that somebody got to explain something to me. You got to tell me what it's going for. And it's, maybe on your birthday and Christmas, you'll get something that I don't ask no questions on. But if you got these special requests along the way, because that's the way I came up, you got to make sure you understand and appreciate the value of the dollar.
So we have these young folks who have these dreams of going pro and doing great things. So they hear you come in and they hear you don't work with some of the best and you don't did some outstanding things. But am I hearing what you're saying, that now you realize from working in that cleaners that the principles and values you learned there really was the foundation to what you did later on in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it provided me with, this whole attitude that, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna do the work. And I developed my brain to a point where I became a student of business. I was willing to kind of do the work to really understand what made things work. And then at a certain point, just my approach to, whoever it may be, that, we're basically equal no matter how much money you got. I mean, I always had a strange way that I went about doing it. And I never got intimidated by anybody, whether I've had meetings with Steve Jobs and other people, and I've met, Warren Buffett and other folks. And they make a whole lot more money than me. Or even when I met Irvin, and it's funny, the first thing I told Irvin, because he was like, we're gonna do this, but if you mess up my money, there's gonna be a problem. And I said, well, first off, I ain't gonna mess up your money. But secondly, I said, I've seen you fight. You ain't gotten but one fight, that was with Ken Johnson. And if you're gonna come my way, then I suggest you bring some help. And that's the real conversation we had. He started laughing. He said, okay. But for me, I don't get intimidated by anybody in a business environment, frankly, unless I feel like they can kick my ass. If they, excuse my language, if they can kick my butt, I go at it, then maybe. But no, that ain't the way I look at it.
But Ken, in business, a lot of the intimidation is not physical, it's mental. So how can a guy who grew up in a cleaners say that I was able to, something happened that you was able to go in a room with someone like Steve Jobs, who is a historical icon, and feel comfortable? I need these young guys to hear, what was it? It had to be something besides he can't beat me with my fist. It had to be something going on inside you.
I wish I could tell you it was more complicated than that for me, but I'm just telling you, I have confidence in my mental capabilities. I have confidence in everything else, but you can get caught up when Steve Jobs is telling you, how much he owns and how he's got his foot on the neck of the music business when he broke that model, and you got all this other stuff. It's easy to kind of turn the corner and get a little nervous. But honestly, I don't. And the reason that I don't starts with that. Now, it's not like I'm gonna sit there and try to convince this man that I'm smarter than he is or anything like that, but I know what I have on my side of the table, and I know I have something on my side of the table that he wants.
So I'm hearing what I'm looking for, though. You say you had mental confidence. So was being prepared a major piece to your success?
I always go in prepared. So I'm gonna try to get this right. And I heard this from a heart surgeon, and he said, piss poor preparation is nothing but a problem.
Wait a minute.
Good preparation prepares you for success.
Okay.
And so I don't, I'm always trying to make sure, and I try to, even on the folks that are on my team now, as we get ready for whatever the meeting may be, you take the time to prepare beforehand. You don't walk in there like you're in a fire drill, because you'll get caught. And you don't want to. The other thing I'm also not afraid of, if it's somebody asks me a question that I don't know the answer to, I'm not, I always try to figure out ways to get my homework done ahead of time. But if I don't know the answer, I'm gonna say I don't know the answer. Let me get back to you.
That sounds like Mr. Franklin talking.
Well,
Yeah.
Let me chime in here on this. When you talk about Ken, you talk about not understanding, or knowing anything simpler than, if you can't kick my butt, then you know what, I'm in there with you. I look at it as, and I'm feeling you from a competitive perspective. I mean, you were a basketball player, you were an athlete. And I tell guys all the time is that if you play long enough, there's gonna be somebody that has superior talent or have a better game that day. You don't never fear your opponent. You can respect them, but you never fear them. And in every corporate meeting that I was in, just like you said, you can respect your adversary, but you can never fear him, because if you bow to the fear, you'll never experience the growth and success that you're looking for.
Yeah, no, I mean, that really is it. And look, it doesn't mean that anytime things got hot, all of a sudden I was ready to throw hands. That wasn't it.
Yeah.
But it's just sitting in the room with the confidence that you need to have, and so that you show that you truly deserve to be at the table. I mean, because that's the main thing that you have to people need to feel from you, no matter what it may be, whether you say a word or not, you deserve to be there.
Yeah.
Hey Ken, what stage of your life did you develop that philosophy about being prepared, about having that? Did it start when you started business, or was that a philosophy you had, much earlier in your life?
I had it earlier in my life, but everything about it came during the course of business. Because to be honest with you, I wasn't the greatest student. When I was in high school, I got by. When I was in college, I basically did what I had to do. And a lot of people ask me what I majored in. I tell them I majored in getting out of school. So, I had a communication major, but I figured out how I could get a major that I would be done and be ready to go to work. And that's what I was really focused on. So my skill set, I really think I became a student after I got out and I found something that I was really passionate about, and that was business.
So what would you say to these young guys now? Let's say you could go back. Would you advocate them to be a student of getting out, or would you say, hey, start being a student right now? I mean, what would you say to them?
My road's not this, and even for my own son, I did advocate that, and my daughter. And so it's start being a student now. If I had to go back, for me, there's certain areas that I concentrate on that I didn't, in particular, like writing skills, things like that. On the business side, I had a major in business. I kind of had what I learned in business, I learned growing up in a business, and then after, when I was actually, from a practical experience perspective. But I also didn't walk into, when I got out of college, I didn't walk into any job that I have feeling like I knew everything. I walked into it recognizing that I needed to learn, and I needed to learn fast, and I needed to deliver. And what I also developed, one of the strongest skills I have is I have a commitment to execution.
Wow.
And what that means is that, if you use a sports analogy, it ain't that we get it all the time off the clock by running these different plays. It's because we get it across the goal line. On the business side, I've developed a reputation that if you give me a task, if it's something I need to accomplish, then I'm gonna get it across the line. And there's a great book out there that I've always looked at, but it teaches the principles and how important a real commitment to execution has to become part of your DNA. So as you think about the types of things you want to learn, and it's as simple as whatever task you do. It doesn't have to be high level businesses, even as you're in school today, where you're trying to figure out, how am I going to go through this class? You got to get through this, but you begin to develop your skills on execution and frankly, just getting things done.
So as you deal with young folks, maybe hire them into your organization, what are some of the top things you look for in these young folks? Oh no, let's go back. What are some of the issues you see with young folks now coming into the business world?
One of the things I think is just an understanding of how important everybody understands the skill set that a young person has, and that 9 times out of 10, there's some experience, but it's not like you're coming in and you're going to set the world on fire. So I look for folks that are going to come in with a certain level of being humble, a clear commitment that they're willing to work hard, and kind of a willingness to learn. And doesn't mean that I don't feel like they have any skills, because I know they do. But you have an opportunity. It's like, you come in and you're around, whether it's somebody like me or what have you, and all of a sudden in the interview process, if I'm interviewing somebody and all they want to do is talk, and there have been times I said, look, we can spend this next 30 minutes however you want. If you want to spend it just talking, fine. If you want to get a little bit of what I can offer to you, then so be it. And anybody that comes in and feels like they're trying to overly impress, that sense of entitlement is what I see in a lot of young people, that they think because they've had whatever the credential they may have from a school perspective is what's going to carry the day. But I will tell you, if I have someone that has their master's here, and I have another person over here that I can see that's got some skills and is willing to work hard and is humble, I'm going to give this person the opportunity, because that 9 times out of 10 is going to be the one that's going to be able to accept. I mean, when we had Magic Johnson Theaters, I mean, we had all sorts of kids working for us, and and every time I'd find one that was willing to work hard and came and wanted to learn more and have opportunities beyond this, that's the kind of young man, young woman that you want to
help. You speak of being humble a few times. What that got to do with it?
Yeah.
Look, I feel like it's probably one of the most important attributes that I have. And that is, no matter what it is that I do, what it is that I achieve, that I don't feel like I need to wave that flag in front of anybody. And when I walk into a room, people they expect you to come in and be, and plus, Bobby, you look like you might be about my size, but I'm 6'6", about 280. So I can walk into that room and I can try to act like I'm gonna move the furniture around, or I can come in and try to figure out how we can all play in the same sandbox. And I'm more interested in letting people feel like we can play in the same sandbox. Doesn't mean that my opinions are any different, or if there's something I'm passionate about, that I won't go to the mat with an idea that I have, or an opinion that I have that I think is right. Mm-hmm. It's just the approach, because you want to, if you understand how to communicate with people, the most important thing is not how many words are coming out of your mouth, but you have to understand what their reaction to your words are going to be. And so I've learned how to deal with both sides of that communication. And I think if you start off the right way, people are more receptive to your ideas than to you.
Now, and so Ken, in that regard, understanding people's reaction, did you kind of like have conversation with yourself before you might have a conversation with a Steve Jobs or with a such? Do you kind of think through what's going to happen before? Is that part of your preparation? Or you just show up?
I mean, what I prepare for is obviously, like in that case, I'll just walk you through it. So there was a number 2 guy over at Apple, and I was taking my number. He had Steve and I had my guy, Howard Schultz, and we're going into this meeting. So he and I had a conversation, and we're saying, okay, what do we want to make sure? We got to steer this the right way. We have to make sure that what does he think Jobs is going to be looking for? He asked me what he thinks, what Howard's going to be looking for. We both prepared there. And then from our side of it, it's like, okay, here's what we need. Here's the role that each of us needs to play as we try to get this across the line. So it's a pretty thorough conversation. And you can't be, I like to try to be as transparent as you can in that preparation, because that's the way that you'll prepare yourself best.
So now, would it be safe to assume, though, that your life hasn't been without obstacles or setbacks?
Yeah.
And one of the principles we teach these guys is the set of the sail. It doesn't matter what happens to you in life, but what you do. Could you give us some examples of how that's applied in your life and your success?
Look, whether it was out trying to sell typewriters or trying to do real estate deals, There've been deals that I've wanted that we didn't get. There've been sales that I wanted that I didn't get. But I just, I keep pressing until I hear the glass break. I don't stop. My persistence is probably one of the strongest attributes I have, because I always feel like there's another opportunity around the door, around the corner. And I try to make sure that, at the end of it, I'm not finding myself feel like I'm stuck in a wall that ain't got no doors, because that's not the case. You got to keep going. You got to keep trying. You got to think through. Don't debrief. You got to debrief yourself on what went wrong with what you've done prior up to this point, which I always do. And what would I do different? How can I do this different? How can I present this differently? Those are the types of things that I try to do. For me, as I'm deciding, in the way that I put it, is all it is a pivot for me. I mean, I basically, if this ain't working on this end, then I pivot and go to the next option.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you're saying that, because one of the principles we again put in these guys is persistence is more valuable than knowledge or even education. I mean, the world is full of educated derelicts, and unrewarded genius is almost like a proverb because people don't persist. And so these guys, how might that be valuable to them in this climate that we're dealing with right now with COVID and all? I mean, the whole world has been turned upside down pretty much.
Look, as Black men, and we have to prepare ourselves to hear no. We have to prepare ourselves to keep going. And that, I'm not over here preaching. I'm just saying that's the reality check of where things are. You're gonna have to be very good to not the best at what you do. And in doing that, there are gonna be folks that are gonna try to get in your way. And you have to decide, what the approach is gonna be with those folks. If they're influential, then you deal with it. If they're not, then you figure out ways to get around it.
Ken, you talked about being the very best. We live in a world where a lot of folks, they just trying to get by and then wonder why they don't get the best. So why do you just say just be good? You said you got to be the very best. Share with them young guys exactly what you mean by that part there. The very best or something.
That was no different than the way that you approach sports or anything else, right? It's like, my best at that particular time wasn't going to take me to the next level, but I knew with the skill set that I had that I worked as hard as I could to be the best.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that there was time for me to pivot, go do something else, I took that same approach that I had in sports and business. And I just felt like I owed it to myself. I mean, there's a certain amount of skill sets that are God-given and others that we have to work hard at. And I just felt like at the end of it, no matter where I landed, I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave anything on the table. Right? I put out all my best effort. I did the best thing that I could, the most that I could, and then I let the chips fall as they may.
When did you start that, and when would you suggest because we're creatures of habit, so when would you suggest that these young guys start giving their very best? And when did you develop that habit?
Well, look, it started for me with sports, right? And so it was one of those things where, especially when I went to college and I was playing for Washington, there was political, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And, so it became, look, I'm gonna go at this and I'm gonna put everything I can into it. And if things don't work out, then I gotta have a plan B. And so I always started thinking like that from at that point. And then when I segue to business and whatever the job is, I also look at it the same way. I'm not out looking for other opportunities. I work as hard as I can, put in everything that I can there. And what I always found with me is that there are opportunities that come to me. And because you develop a reputation and people acknowledge your level of performance and they acknowledge your level of expertise, and then these opportunities start coming your way. So I wasn't one of those guys that just sit there and, I'm working in one place and then all of a sudden I got resumes floating everywhere else. I just focused 110% there. So it started very early for me.
You just echoed what Clark Kellogg said a couple of weeks to these guys in terms of him becoming a broadcaster, right? He didn't realize he was preparing for broadcasting just in terms of how he would handle being interviewed himself and the reputation that he was developing. How important is that for these guys to understand what they do now, impact that might have on the future? And I want some of you guys to jump in. I know you got questions, some of our board.
Look, it's critical. I mean, the guy who's the broadcaster, maybe some folks know my wife, but my wife is Pat Harvey. So, she's been in that business for over 30 years and has built a tremendous amount of success and career in what she does. But she's gone about it kind of the same way. You basically have to just continue to work as hard as you can and develop your skills. But as much as anything, make sure your behavior is accountable. You're going to be accountable. So don't think that there's things that you can do in this early stage in your life that you're not going to have some accountability down the road, because you will. And that, I say that now, but I guarantee you back when I was their age, I didn't think like that. Yeah. I just did what I had to do. And if I needed to have some fun, I had some fun, but it's hard to instill that portion of it. But what I always had this thing is I was never about anything excess. And I kept my eye on knowing that there was going to be opportunities down the road. So there's, I put some disciplines in place, and I had guardrails around what I do and what I would. I mean, it's a great question, because it just, for me, the early model of what we were trying to do, because we were always starting as a startup, ended up being easier. And I say easier, it just allowed for a growth trajectory that was going to be, it might take me 10 years to get to a point where with a partner I could get in 3 or 4. And so as I looked at these businesses, these are also at times mid to, I'd say, 5 to 10 year opportunities. And what I mean by that is that at that point, because we were building businesses, create value, and then potentially sell those businesses off, you want to have that ability to build value by building your revenue over a shorter period of time than a longer. And it doesn't mean that if I had an opportunity that made sense and had the scale, that's the other thing. And what I mean by scale is how big it is. If I felt like I could do something like that, you're still going to have different alliances and partnerships like what we're talking about to get to where you want to be, whether it's investor partners or whether it's going to be banks or whatever you're going to have to get there. But it's always been just an easier as you can leverage the balance sheet of whoever your partner is to do bigger things. I'll go back to when I was a senior in high school. And I was born and raised in Seattle, and I was playing ball in Seattle, and I had gotten in a little bit of trouble with my girlfriend got pregnant. And my dad got mad and decided that he was going to take me over to Eastern Washington where he was, and that I was going to have to play my senior year in high school ball there. So I was rebellious, and I basically said I wasn't going, but with my dad, you can say whatever you want to say, you're going to do what he wants. So my senior year in high school ends up at a school called Walla Walla High School. Only thing in the city is the penitentiary. Now everything is wineries and everything else, but I'll get pulled over there. So what ends up happening is I decide I'm not going to play basketball. And he basically says, "You're going to play." So I said, "Okay, I'll play, but I'm just going to go through the motions." So there was a junior college coach there. They had, it was a feeder for all the major universities because they brought in brothers from Philly and everybody else. And I used to play with him all the time, and he'd see me. So my first 4 or 5 games, I was just going through the motions. And so one Saturday he called me. He said, "You come on over to see me." So I went over to see him, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to play." He says, "Well, why don't you want to?" So he dug into it. Long story short, he ends up saying to me, "So let me get this. You don't want to be here. And so because you don't want to be here, you've decided that you ain't going to play. Why don't let's turn this around a little bit." He said, "So what do you think the easiest way for you to get out of here is?"
Mm.
And he said, "So if you just get your act together, get your head out your butt." And then he asked me, he said, "So who do you think you're hurting?" I said, "Well," he said, "You think you're hurting your folks?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "No, you ain't hurting your folks. Only folks you're hurting are yourself." And so at that point, I took that, and then I went on a tear, and that's, I got out of that rut that I had put myself in. So, that was probably one of the first, let's say, hurdles that I had to get over, and it was a self-imposed hurdle. So hopefully, Nigel, that answers a little bit of your question. But we all have bumps in the road down the road. And look, have I had business opportunities or things that went sideways? But you always do. I mean, people look at, as you if you do this long enough, they want to see that you've had sometimes that you had to address adversity, pick yourself up, and then what did you do once you had to address that? And I've had those too. But in the same breath, I just I figure out what my solution is, what the pivot, what the plan B is, and I keep it moving.
So
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to ask about the numbers. Like, what was the thing that made you make your first million? What was the thing that, like, the first million? I understand that is a milestone that is really important.
Well, and I as much as you like to talk about money, I don't like to talk about money. Okay.
Okay.
What I do is a success brings money if you're doing the right thing. And in my mind, have I made millions? Yes. Have I been able to keep it? Yes. I mean, the first opportunity that I had doing it was just real estate deals that I was doing, and part of my business that where I was able to turn a few real estate deals into significant profits. The next part of it was, fortunately for me, I'm at a point where that's, when people bring me on and they want my expertise, that's what I get paid. And, so I don't necessarily have to go out and do a real estate deal to make $1 million. That's what I get paid on an annual basis plus, right? So you got to get your skill set and understand. And I don't look, I've always had expectations, okay, about what I would make. But that internship that I told you about, so the brother who told me about it, he gave me an idea what he thought I was going with what it was paying. And I go all the way through this process thinking that this is what I'm going to get paid. And then as soon as they get ready to offer me the job, I said, "Well, how much is the compensation?" And they tell me, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Now, I could have said, y'all ain't paying me enough, but I didn't know anything. I'm trying to learn this business, and I knew the opportunity they presented to me. So I took the job, and I took it for much less than what I had anticipated. And it ended up being the start of my career.
So on that note, right there, you knew ahead of time that the initial money was not that critical. So you've always had a long-term view, it seems like, so that you could deal with whatever is in front of you.
Right.
Is that the case? Well, I actually wanted your insight on it, because it's really, I remember my first job, I was looking at the pay. I was looking at what is this they're offering me, and I didn't have the guidance of someone like you to say, you need to look at something else. So what would you recommend that people look at?
You know who told me?
On?
The first lesson I learned in money was for a little bit of money. And that was when I went and I asked my grandfather for a raise. From 50 cents to, I wanted $5. He comes up with $1 and I'm complaining. He's like, you cannot appreciate when you're making money until you're making a little bit of money, because then you learn to appreciate the dollar more. And you understand that this just does not come. You don't want to, like, all of a sudden, if you get a windfall, you're going out and buying everything. You got a long life to live. And you got, as long as it keeps costing us money to live, you got to be in a position where you appreciate what you're doing and give yourself some running room so that you can retire at a certain point, that you can just call it a day and then you got enough and you don't have to worry about it.
Wow.
Hopefully, Nigel, that helped.
Let me piggyback on that with you too, Ken and Nigel. One of the things that Everett does a great job with these kids is this thing called vision, which is seeing the potential not only in yourself but in things, right? And with that vision, Boss also brings in a thing called discipline, which is the commitment to bring that vision into fruition, along with passion, because as Ken said, it's more than just a dash. Life is a marathon, right? So you got to have something that's going to ignite you, something that's going to motivate you, something that's going to inspire you. And so I say that to say to you that, you look at a tree and you a piece of a tree laying on the ground and you see a limb. Somebody else will look at that tree and see a forest. Somebody else will look at that tree and see an industry. And so I say that to say to you that as you come back and share with, this is what we share with these guys now, to have vision, because right now on this call, we got folks that might be sitting in the house, maybe without any heat on, right? Or they might not be 6'6". They might not have their mother and father. They might not have anybody in their life that's entrepreneurs. But through Boss, these young men are developing and cultivating great vision, and not only the vision, but the discipline to bring it into fruition, because we also tap in their passion. And I think that's so important, because as more Ken talks and you, Nigel, also, we realize that it's more than this thing is a conglomerate of stuff that's got to get done. And Mr. Franklin and I, we talk about it all the time, Ken. Man, can you imagine these young guys is 11, 12, 13, 15, 17 years old, and they're getting this knowledge, right? That if they apply it, then they're going to have success. And they might see success ain't necessarily money. It's about being able to say, I want to do this, and then you're able to do it.
No, I applaud the efforts of you guys. I mean, for me at 11 or 12, fortunately, I had it around my family, but everybody's doesn't have that.
That's right.
But to think that even I would have had this type of opportunity to get exposure and to meet people and listen. And look, we're not here talking so that you take every idea I throw out there and you say, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it. But you get enough ideas that you can begin to develop your own style and your own approach to these things, and develop your own goals and how you're going to get there and how you're going to build the life that you want to live.
Hey, Ken,
we got a couple of the guys who want to ask the question. Marcus is first up. Marcus, you have some questions you want to ask Ken? You got to unmute yourself. Oh, you good. We can't hear you.
Said its internet signal's low.
Ken and Nia, you got a question while we try to fix that? Are you still with us?
We're gonna go with Fraser real quick. Fraser Marcus, I know you're hustling more right now.
Oh, my bad. Shoot.
Go ahead.
was gonna say, man, I think I might have, but Bishop covered a lot of what I might have been able to ask. So I don't know if I got one anymore.
I have a few questions for you, Mr.
Go ahead,
Lombard.
Frazier.
All right, so basically, I was wondering because I personally was really fascinated with the whole idea of real estate, and I've been trying to start bird dogging. Been looking for like rundown houses and selling them to sellers, people who wanted to buy houses. But the area of San Diego that I live in is kind of like it's like a lot of not a lot of rundown houses around in this area, and so I started researching like wholesaling and stuff like that, because wholesaling you don't really need a license, as in it was versus commercial, industrial, or land real estate. I was just wondering, what would you recommend if, because I'm still a minor, what would you recommend to a minor like me if I should start wholesaling or just focus on getting my license in real estate and become like a commercial trader?
So the way what you have described is exactly how I started in the real estate business. And I was a little older than you, but not much older. And there was a guy that I became aware of that was going around and buying up all those beat up houses, buying apartment buildings and things like that. He was an African American. And what I did is I went and I knocked on his door and I introduced myself and I said, I want to learn the real estate business. And, he tested me. And then he told me, he said, okay, then I'm going to take you along on Saturdays. He said, I start at 7 a.m. He said, at 7:01, I'm gone. So don't think you got 5 minutes to spare. And I spent the early part of my, probably about a year, just driving around, listening, taking notes and learning. Now, the part of the business that you're talking about, as you describe a neighborhood that has got rundown houses and the like, that's how I started my career, buying those houses, which I'm not suggesting that is the step to take right now, but you buying those houses and you have an opportunity to, fix them up and do it. And I didn't have a whole lot of money to do it, but I figured out a way to do it. The first house I bought was maybe $20,000, and I ended up selling it a couple years later at a significant profit. So it was, there's ways to do this, but for you right now, whether it's a developer, whether it's the sales side of it that you want to get in, then, figure out one of these brokerage firms that are in the sales side of the business that maybe you can intern at. So you can, or a broker that you're a sales broker that that you can kind of partner with, but ask them, look, can I tag along for a while to kind of learn the business? Those are the types of things that you want to do. The brokerage side, what you're suggesting in terms of getting I've never had a sales license. Anything that I've sold has been something out of my own portfolio. So you have to decide what makes sense. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but as you begin to get into the business, really learn what your options are.
And Ken, my advice to that young man is just what you said. I think now, because he's a minor, you focus on the knowledge piece of whatever it is that you want to choose to do. Because the more knowledge you gain and the better understanding of the areas that you want to go in, when the opportunity presents itself, you would have done the preparation to put you in a place where you can move forward with whatever comes about. But as a minor, if you need to make sure you're gaining as much knowledge about whatever it is, area of real estate investment you want to get at this point in time. And it's funny because my son has done the same thing. And I tell people, advise young people all the time that, find something that you enjoy doing and not look at the financial piece in the beginning. Because if you find something that you truly are vested in and you enjoy doing, the financial rewards will come with that, because you will make the commitment and discipline and everything that's needed in order to be successful at it.
And, I don't know what part of San Diego you're in, but, if you know where East Village is, That was an apartment project that I did down there. And if you know, over in La Jolla, where the University Town Center is, if you look at that, where the old Sears building is, that's my project too. So there's a lot of things that, maybe even you could tag along, let me know what your availability is, and potentially even, like we can have you tour some of those projects and get a nice understanding of how these things can come together.
Okay, so now going into the future, fresh out of high school, going into college. So let's say I wanted to get into wholesaling because I don't have the money to buy a house and then fix it up. I just wanted to pick it up from a property owner and then have a contract with him and then send it to a house buyer. And then basically I just get like the money from that. So let's say if I wanted to do that, would you recommend that or me going to college to learn about real estate or get my license to become a real estate agent?
Yeah, I'm always going to suggest to you that you go to college. It doesn't mean that you can't continue to kind of look at opportunities like what you're suggesting on the side, but you need to.
Right.
Yeah, there's really great opportunities to learn the business, and in particular, there's an aspect of the business that's going to strengthen your skill set, and that's knowing how to underwrite a deal. There are two parts of an opportunity. There's obviously the underwriting, which is the financial analysis that takes place, and then developing your own gut instincts in terms of what projects, what deals make sense, and which ones don't. And
if you could recommend some courses for college, that would be good for getting into the real estate business. Sure. Could you let me know?
Yep, I will.
Okay.
I'll get your information from Everett, and I'll give you some suggestions.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Anyone
Bobby,
else?
I think we lost Everett. There you go. Go ahead, man.
Toby, anyone else with questions?
Anyone? Sorry, I didn't realize my mic was off. Yeah, Caleb, London. Anything that came out, insightful, things you want to know more about. Emil, I know you're a little young over there, but I know something stuck out. Emil, what do you think? How you digesting?
Well, I learned a lot of good stuff, but the questions, no, I don't really have that many questions.
Okay. Can you, by any chance, summarize some of the things you may have gotten from this call?
Well, one thing that I learned that you have to be persistent and not just be in the background, just waiting for something to happen.
True.
Yeah, so if we don't have any more questions, Mr. Glenn, do you think that would be a good time to put everybody in breakout rooms?
Well, yeah, because Ken promised us an hour. We appreciate the fact that he's gone over for 20 minutes. I mean, Ken, that you, what we're going to do now is just break out into groups and talk about what you've talked about and then come back and summarize. But we appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday morning to share your knowledge and wisdom with these guys and to be just another example of what's possible if you do what you have to do and if you don't make no excuses.
Right. No, Everett, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate you and appreciate everybody on here, and good luck. And if there's ever anything I can do, just reach out and do whatever I can.
Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Everybody have a good weekend. Everybody stay safe out there. And if you're old enough to vote, go vote now.
Hey, tell them, Ken. It was a pleasure listening to your story today, Ken.
All right, man. All right. Talk to y'all later.